What's the move for MJ Melendez? We'll dive into that in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into our second episode of Locked On Royals for today. I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me, well, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB. I actually just got off work and decided to do the episode now since there's a rain out tonight. So it's been kind of a wild and chaotic day. Lots of work to be done, but work that had to be done and maybe caught a little bit of a break because the game isn't going to be played tonight, and it gives me more flexibility of getting this podcast out. But as for working at 810, I do some hosting, co-hosting, and some producing as well. So you can always catch me over there. But when you come to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you are getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Questions and comments can always be left to me on Twitter, or you can reach me on the YouTube channel. But again, always be sure to hit that subscribe button. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. We'll have a couple of picks coming up for you in about 10 to 15 minutes or so. Maybe you take my advice, maybe you don't. It is your money. You know, I place my own money on bets. If you feel like you've got a better idea of what's going on, be my guest. Just do so over at FanDuel. Well, as I just mentioned, the Royals are not going to be playing tonight. They were rained out in Cleveland. They're going to be making that up as a doubleheader in late August. So the Royals will only see Cleveland one more time in this series before heading back home for a 7-game homestand that includes the Seattle Mariners and the New York Yankees. So instead of doing a recap, instead of breaking down game 2 and all of that like I had planned, we had to switch it up a little bit for our second episode today. And we're going to go into MJ Melendez. And this is not the first time we've done an MJ podcast, but I also believe this is another right time to do so. I always try to go back and revisit a couple of segments that we've had just to see really where we are at. And where we are at with MJ Melendez is not in a good spot, to put it lightly. MJ Melendez is probably in the worst stretch of his major league career, and no signs really of him breaking out of it. And I think you could go back to Sunday's game against San Diego. Now, Melendez was in the lineup tonight before the game got rained out. I'd imagine he's going to be in there tomorrow. I'd imagine they'll actually just keep the same lineup that they had for tonight's game. But on Sunday, MJ Melendez came up as the tying run, and he popped out to third base to Manny Machado in that at-bat. And I think that was his final at-bat of the game. And it was a slider that was hung, was right down the middle. I think for a hitter that's going well, that ball is deposited 450 feet from home plate. I mean, that's a ball that should be crushed. And to me, that was maybe not rock bottom, but a telltale sign of he's not close. He's not close to breaking out of whatever stretch he feels like he's in, whether he is as unconfident, no, it's not really a word, at the plate as we are watching him at the plate. I know that Ryan Lefevre in Tampa said that his spirits are still high and he's taking a lot of pride in his defense. However, there does come a point in time in a season where you have to make the tough decision. Is this guy really going to turn things around? Is there going to be a surge at some point? Or do you need to cut your losses and put someone else out there? Not that they need to release MJ. I don't envision them doing that at all. But does he need a demotion to Omaha? Does he need to just be moved to the bench? Do you make a trade to get an outfielder? I know JJ Piccolo said on John Heyman's podcast that if the production doesn't turn around from the outfield, they'll need to start looking at areas for that where they can trade for coming up and nearing the deadline. If they can bolster that lineup a little bit, bolster the bottom half of the lineup. The thing is, though, with MJ Melendez, and there's a very important reason as to why MJ Melendez is still in Kansas City. and why you can't really look at him as a Garrett Hampson, or you can't really look at him as a Dyrone Blanco or an Adam Frazier. It's not really the same. And I'm not just going over the numbers here. It's potential. It's ceiling. And the Royals clearly feel like MJ Melendez can come out of this stretch, even though it's been a 2-month-long stretch. They feel like when he gets going, if he gets going for that matter, they can make this lineup as good as they had hoped for. I mean, Hunter Renfroe, as we touched on it this morning, has been exactly what they expected him to be going back to May 12th. No hitting in the 280s. On base is well up there, hitting for a little bit more power, hitting the ball harder. That's a stretch that MJ Melendez desperately needs, longer than just a game or two. He needs a month of feeling like things are really going well, getting that swagger, getting that confidence back that we saw at the beginning of the year. And I think it's possible. I truly do. Because last year, I thought when the first half was concluding, the Royals were in Minnesota and MJ Melendez just had a putrid game. And I remember the talk then was he probably needs a reset in Omaha. But he gets this time off for the All-Star break, and he comes back and has a really good second half. He was one of the better hitters in the second half for the Royals. Is that in the back of Royals coaches' minds? Is that in the back of J.J. Piccolo's mind? That when they look at MJ Melendez, they say, man, if we get to the All-Star break and we're still in a playoff spot and then you get second half MJ, well, dang, at that point, you really feel like you can make a big-time jump with this lineup, with this group. And for MJ Melendez to be this guy that right now is not even a liability. I mean, he's unplayable. And that's blunt to say. That's tough to say. But MJ Melendez, the slash line, the power, the strikeout rate, all of that, you can't put that in the lineup every single day. You just can't. And that, to me, is going to be this measuring stick, if you will. That's going to be the measuring tool with MJ, is the offense. If the offense gets back to league average, feel a little bit better about the lineup. I mean, that's kind of the crazy thing with this offense, with this team, being 10 games over 500, even after a bad stretch of play. They're doing so with some guys severely underachieving and guys that they had the expectation for, like an MJ Melendez. But I go back to it, with a Mike Moustakas scenario. I go back to it with a Ryan O'Hearn scenario. And I know they're two completely different situations and two different players. But the Royals back in 2014 felt like Moustakas was just kind of unplayable and he needed a reset, but he never really got that reset. It was just maybe more of the fire to motivate him into a much better finish out to the season, and was a main reason the Royals had success in the playoffs. He went from 147 to hitting over 200, and that to me was the big jump. And that was believing in the player and the players believing in that player. And with MJ, I've said this a couple times on the podcast, you look at what a reset in Omaha could do. For some players, if it's about confidence, I think a reset is the right thing. Because you go down to AAA, you tear up bad pitching or tear up, 4A pitching, for lack of a better term, and you come back up to the big leagues going, hey, I saw the ball, find gaps, I hit the ball out a couple of times, I had a better eye at the plate, and even though they weren't major league pitchers, it's a little bit of confidence. It's just like, it's your slump buster, if you will. And yeah, the slump buster would be more preferable at the big league level, where he could get out of this facing big league pitching, but right now it's not looking like that's the case. However, I do stand on the idea. I have the argumentative point of, if MJ Melendez is not losing confidence, I don't think there's a need to send him to Omaha. I really don't. I think you're better off just seeing if he can have that second half version, if he can just hit his way out of it. Because I truly don't think there is a fix in Omaha. Yeah, we could look at Drew Waters and say he's better than MJ Melendez and he might be able to give better numbers. But to me, I'm more so looking at the ceiling. I'm more so looking at what this lineup could look like at the best possible version of that player. And the second half, MJ Melendez, if he comes about, if that week off in the All-Star break can give him the solid reset he needs, then I think you can look at this offense much differently. Nelson Velasquez was completely down in the dumps. Not optimistic-wise or not emotion-wise. He's not down in the dumps. But in terms of our confidence in Nelson Velasquez a couple of weeks ago before that Seattle series, we did an episode. It was, can you keep putting it or Nelson Velasquez in the lineup every single night or every other night? And then he kind of tapped into that power a little bit. He's not fixed by any means, but he had that confidence coming for him because the Royals believed he'd get out of it, and he's gotten out of it. MJ Melendez, maybe it's still just hoping and praying. And I get that at some point in time, you have to stop hoping and praying, and you still have to start acting on things to keep your team competitive, because MJ Melendez is not a competitive player right now in terms of the just numbers. I'm sure he's got the fire and the passion. We've seen it before with MJ Melendez. I'm just not sold a reset in Omaha is the best fix. I think the Royals have a plan of how they want to attack this. If they go and make a trade and it bumps that Melendez out of the lineup, then okay. But if they feel like a second half surge is incoming, well, they do have stats and they've got something to back it up. But it has happened before, and maybe it can happen again. I know the Royals are desperately hoping that is the case. We'll take our first break of the show. When we come back, was the rain out tonight a little bit of a blessing in disguise? We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, I want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors today in Game Time. As I mentioned before, we dove into that Melendez segment. 7-game homestand coming up. You're going to have the Seattle Mariners. You're going to have the New York Yankees. Should be a lot of fun giveaways coming up next week with the Yankees in town. Buy your tickets over at Game Time. They're going to have you covered, whether you're going with one person, you're going with a group of people, going with your family. Does not matter. They've always got great deals right for you. The tickets out of the hottest, the cheapest prices for you, the most expensive, the best seats in the house. All of that is going to be covered, and you never have to worry about where you're getting your tickets over at Game Time. So here's what you need to do. Go and download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Also want to let you know about one of our new local sponsors here. They are over in Overland Park if you're in the Kansas City, Missouri area, and that is PXG Golf. I told you about it last week that I got fitted for my long-range game with a driver, a custom-made driver that really fit me perfectly. I know for a lot of us out there, you're slicing the ball, you're not hitting the ball exactly how you want to. Well, go over there. It takes about 40 minutes, $25 for one of those custom fittings, and it can be your mid-range game, it can be your long game, it can be your short game. They're going to figure out what suits you best over at PXG. So here's what you need to do. You need to go visit pxg.com/LockedOnRoyals to schedule your fitting at PXG Kansas City at 7517 West 119th Street in Overland Park. Get fitted for any club, and you'll get a dozen golf balls free. That's pxg.com/LockedOnRoyals to schedule your fitting today. Anytime that you have a rainout, and whether the Royals are playing well, they're not playing well, as they are right now, it sucks to have a rainout, right? Because you don't know what you're going to watch tonight. Maybe you had plans to go to a bar, watch with a buddy, watch with your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your dad, your mom, grandparents. As I said, with Game Time, you're going to games with those people. Maybe you just had plans to watch from your couch at home. Well, the rainout just prevented all of that. And, I kind of took tonight's game as a break for me, because we did 2 episodes today. I had work today, so pretty busy. I'm not too disappointed. That's more of a selfish thing for me. I'm not too disappointed with no game tonight. But also, just from a technicality standpoint, from a schedule standpoint, I kind of think it's a blessing in disguise. And I'll tell you why here. I never want to advocate for a loser's mentality, and what I'm doing right now is basically giving a loser's mentality, not having confidence in the Royals winning the game tonight. What it does, it takes a hell of a lot of pressure off tomorrow's game. It really does. And it lets the Royals skip Daniel Lynch. And there goes another round in the rotation until Michael Walk is back, assuming everything goes well with him. So I look at it this way. The Royals have a crushing loss last night. Whether you want to say it's crushing, disappointing, infuriating, whatever you want to call it, I agree with you. They lose last night, and you're looking at these final two games, and you got Seattle over the weekend. You got the Yankees and the Dodgers next week. With this awful stretch of play and the brutal schedule, kind of feels like a blessing in disguise to me. Now you get Brady Singer for tomorrow instead of trying to gamble and win with Daniel Lynch to either avoid a sweep or it's a rubber match game. Now, think about it this way. Tomorrow you win. You leave Cleveland with a split. You didn't lose any ground in the American League Central. You don't see them back at Progressive Field, I believe, until the end of August. So you've got quite some time until you'll see Cleveland in Cleveland again, unless I'm missing some other part on the schedule. I know that's only game one of, what was it, 12, 13. I know one of the YouTube commenters brought it up. I apologize for being wrong with the 9 games. I'm like, it's 9, 10, 11, 12, or 13 games. But they're going to see him, and this was rescheduled for August 26th. So maybe they do see him one more time in Cleveland, and they just decided to postpone this game until that point in August. But that's way down the road. Let's not even worry about that doubleheader. You don't need to. It's June 5th. That's August 26th. So tomorrow, if you win, you didn't lose any ground. 4 games back of Cleveland. And tonight, fingers crossed, Minnesota loses to the Yankees, gives you a little bit more cushion in the wild card race. You hope Detroit loses, gives you a little bit more cushion holding on to a playoff spot. And then you just get an extra day of rest. Then on Friday, you could maybe just go straight to Alec Marsh. And then you got Cole Reagans on Saturday, and you're going to have Seth Lugo on Sunday. Those feel like favorable games. Favorable games for Kansas City coming up this weekend. And then you got to worry about, on Monday night, it could be Brady Singer, Daniel Lynch, and Alec Marsh for 3 of those games. And then you only get Cole Reagans for the finale in that series. And that's if they choose that route, which I imagine they will. When you already had the off day, everybody had an extra day of rest, you might as well just skip Daniel Lynch in the rotation. So that's what I'm looking at it as. Just as a technicality standpoint, it is a loser's mentality because that's showing I don't have confidence in them winning tonight, because also, if they would have won tonight, hey, you got confidence rolling into Sunday's game. Then you take that with Daniel Lynch, you won the series, and you gained a game on Cleveland in the American League Central. I just don't know if I hold that much confidence with the way the team has been playing, and with Daniel Lynch kind of just being that spot starter of either trying to avoid a sweep or trying to take a series. To me, it didn't feel that winnable, in my opinion. And now, this blessing in disguise, as I'm calling it, you get to throw Brady Singer, a better pitcher than Daniel Lynch, on Thursday afternoon. You can skip Daniel Lynch. You can go get Cole Reagans and Seth Lugo over the weekend in Seattle. And, it just kind of feels like, this is one of those spots where you might have caught a break. I mean, you've not played great baseball over the last 10. You have dropped some games in the standings. You have dropped some games in the wild card race. But when you've got the Mariners, Yankees, and Dodgers, even one game of just a little extra break from a good opponent might give you a chance to reset. And who wouldn't be thrilled leaving Cleveland 1-1? Who wouldn't be? You're back to 11 games over 500. You're back at home for 7 games. Kick your feet up. And then we're to kind of by the end of next week, mid-June. All right, maybe you get a little chance to reset. You've had 2 off days in the last 3. It could mean rustiness, but it also could be nice day off. Nice day off to rest up. They have just a brutal week next week, coming off of facing a red-hot Seattle team, the Yankees and Dodgers. I mean, I'm not saying tonight was going to be a loss. I'm just saying, if it did end up being a loss, now I'm relying on Daniel Lynch to avoid the sweep for the first time this season. I don't feel that great about it. It's just me. Daniel Lynch in a rubber match game, I feel a little bit better because you already took 1. But now tomorrow, I like the matchup with Brady Singer over there. I do. I really like the matchup. And then you leave Cleveland and you go back home. I don't know. I kind of see it as a little bit of a blessing in disguise. Of course, I'm disappointed, and it sucks that we can't watch baseball tonight. But tomorrow's game is incredibly early. It's a noon game. And that, to me, is completely fine. That is fine to have an extra night off. to throw the better pitcher in the finale. And if you lose, okay, so you lose. And you drop to 6 games back. Not feeling too good, but still 2 losses would be better than getting swept, which I just don't know where I stood in the final 2 games with Brady Singer and Daniel Lynch. I take that back. I know exactly where I stood. Wasn't that confident. Brady Singer didn't start last week. He could have been rusty, and he may be rusty tomorrow. But if he was rusty tonight, lost the game, and Daniel Lynch was trying to avoid the sweep, just don't know if I like that matchup. Not against Tanner Beebe of the Cleveland Guardians. So tomorrow, there's a chance the Royals leave with a split. And I think considering how we all felt on Tuesday night, you would have taken that. And then you head back home for a 7-game homestand. All right, before our final segment, I want to tell you about Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, let's talk about Brady Singer and the spot he finds himself in tomorrow. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That's Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. Before our Singer segment, I want to tell you a little bit about FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And tomorrow night, it's going to be game 1 of the NBA Finals between the Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics. I told you this morning that I would have taken Boston and the money line straight out in that game. But I also might place a couple of player props. Maybe Luka Doncic finds his way in there. PJ Washington with 3-pointers made. Feel kind of confident in that. And then for tomorrow, the Royals and the Guardians, maybe the strikeout total for Brady Singer. I know he's had a couple of good starts there. Not overall great numbers, but has had some really good starts in Cleveland. Maybe that is tomorrow. I'll take the over on the strikeouts. But I'm going to do so over at FanDuel. So tomorrow's game, it's going to be an early one. It's the getaway day. It is the finale in Cleveland, and Brady Singer's going to get the ball. And it's going to be Brady Singer instead of Daniel Lynch because of the rain out tonight. And I look toward tomorrow, and I look at what it could mean for this team. They're skipping, by the way, the opener situation with Nick Sandlin and then Logan Allen. So the Royals didn't really catch a break in that regard because Logan Allen has not only been really bad this year, he's been really bad against the Royals in his career. So he was going to be the bulk guy tonight in the game. So now it falls on the Royals knocking around Tanner Beebe a little bit, who has comparable numbers, not so much with the home runs given up, but kind of comparable numbers to Tristan McKenzie, at least ERA-wise. But the Royals will have a tougher task than what they were going to have tonight, facing an opener and Logan Allen. But this one, I think, is more so on Brady Singer. This one is going to be very interesting to me because Brady Singer's numbers look good this year, and I am not going to try to tear down or point out the negatives or the flaws of Brady Singer, because if you would have told me on June 6th Brady Singer would have a 2.64 ERA, I would have, 1, called you crazy, or 2, I would have said this rotation must be one of the best in baseball. And the Royals have certainly put together a damn good rotation, and Brady Singer's bounce back and Alec Marsh's bounce back have been a big part of it. Not just Reagan's, Lugo, and Waka pitching very well. It's these guys that have found a way to be reliable. And tomorrow, it's a big time outing for him because he missed his start last week. That would have occurred in Minnesota because he had that stomach bug or that stomach flu that had sidelined Kyle Isbell for a little bit. So he had been dealing with it for quite some time. But now, apparently, he's good to go. He's going to start tomorrow, and you push Daniel Lynch off that spot. If Brady Singer can go out there tomorrow and win this game for Kansas City, I think it shows you that Brady Singer is somebody you can count on. And I think even more so than you might have already counted on him this year. The reason I want to say it like that is because how many of you out there, when you watch Brady Singer pitch, you're like waiting for last year's Brady Singer to show up? Like, I don't do that anymore with Cole Reagans. When Cole Reagans takes the bump, I expect him to shove. When Seth Lugo takes the bump, I expect him to shove. When Michael Walker takes the bump, I expect him to pitch well. Maybe not shove, but quality start. With Alec Marsh and Brady Singer, I think I still go back and forth with I got faith, I got confidence to, wow, I'm pleasantly surprised he looked that good. Like if Brady Singer could give what Alec Marsh did in Baltimore or against Baltimore twice, and the Royals can win this game tomorrow on the back of his pitching performance, damn, you got to feel good going into that Seattle series, even though you didn't win any of your previous 3 series. You lost 3 of 4 in Minnesota. You lose 2 of 3 to San Diego, and you just split with Cleveland. But if Brady Singer can do that, just give them a little nudge, a little spark, a little confidence going into these final 3 series in which have been so difficult. If he can just give them a little bit of a spark going into this final 3 series stretch against Seattle, New York, and LA, you have to take what you can work with. Because here's the great part about it. When that game concludes tomorrow, if the Royals win, they're 11 games over 500, and they're halfway through this awful stretch. You know, it's felt all doom and gloom. Oh, here comes the downfall. You know, you're ripping your hair out over losses. You're halfway through that 6-series stretch. Halfway. Now, the toughest part has just begun because you get first place. And next week is going to be the toughest week the Royals have all year long, regardless if they play well or not. Opponent-wise, the Yankees and Dodgers back-to-back is not fair. It is just not fair to see those two teams with their pitching staff, with their offenses. It ain't going to be fun. But you look at the halfway point of this incredibly difficult gauntlet, you're still 11 games over 500 if Brady Singer gets it done tomorrow afternoon. And you feel good about 11 games over 500. And I know I'm looking too far ahead and I'm putting W's and L's on the schedule. But if you win tomorrow, man, you got to feel like you can go in and take a series at home against Seattle. Seattle's offense is not really the offenses you've been seeing. They got a great pitching staff, but the Royals do too. And they'd have 2 of their better guys in the bump in 2 of those games. You take 2 of 3. All right. Well, then you are, what would that be? 12 games? 12 games over 500, entering that awful stretch against the Yankees and Dodgers. And let's say, in a terrible scenario, the Royals get swept in both. I don't envision that happening, but let's say, for this argument, 5 games over 500. And I would put my bottom dollar on the fact the Royals would still have a playoff spot. And then the season's not over. It's not done. You still have to go out there and beat teams that are lesser than the ones you've been facing. But, you know, another bad stretch of play could bury the Royals in the end. But if you find a way to win tomorrow, take a series in Seattle, boy, I got to feel good about going into those Yankees and Dodgers series. I really do. Because like you had with the 8-game winning streak, you feel like you've got this cushion that you can't afford the bad play. That's what we talked about after the 8-game winning streak. They had given themselves a cushion going into this bad stretch of play in June. And they were 15 games over 500. And now they've dropped 5 games since then. They have had the standings get a little bit more separated. The wild card race has gotten a little bit tighter. But still, they are 36 and 26 with 100 games to go. You get to the end of June, you still got a winning record. You're right there in the thick of it. And you feel like it's going to come down to that final month of the season. I have to keep reiterating this because for some people out there, it's not really catching on. We've been asking for years for the Royals to have competitive baseball from April to September. You're in the middle of that right now. You really are. And the way things look, the way the expectation has been set, I don't think they're going to be going away anytime soon. I think they're going to be there in September. They may not have a playoff spot, but they'll be damn close to one. And if they're holding on to one, it's going to make September that much more exhilarating. And they'd be one of the talking points of Major League Baseball. Those are kind of the positives you have to remind yourself when the Royals are going through a bad stretch like this. And maybe someone to remind yourself when they don't play tonight because of a rainout. But they'll be back in action tomorrow. It'll be at 12:10 first pitch. Brady Singer versus Tanner Beebe of the Cleveland Guardians. Well, that's going to do it for our second episode of the day on Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. One last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available for free on the Fire TV Channels app. Tomorrow, we are going to recap that series finale in Cleveland and preview the upcoming series against the Seattle Mariners. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.